Good evening and welcome to the Dollar Dogs and Beer podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and it looks like Joe has accidentally dropped out of the stream, so I'll start things rolling off tonight on what was a great week in baseball last week for my Atlanta Braves. Jason will not be joining us tonight. He is feeling a little bit under the weather, so he has been scratched from his start tonight and is considered to be day-to-day until further notice, like so many pitchers in fantasy baseball have been this season. All right, so as soon as Joe hops back on, I'll get him introduced, get his drink introduced. But for me tonight, guys, I will be drinking from New Trail Brewing Company a berry lemonade. It was recommended by my friend Aaron, who actually works for New Trail, and absolutely delicious so far. Here's Joe. Hey, Joe, welcome back.
I went to click mute and I clicked leave studio instead. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I did my own little introduction. Everybody knows Jason is off tonight since he's not feeling so well. So how are you holding up? I love the shirt.
Yeah, new shirt this weekend. Celtic Fling was a blast at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. It's a great tradition I have and my wife has now. So it's a lot of fun. And of course, as we know, malt whiskey is a great drink. So new shirt for the collection. So
I could drink malt whiskey every night and I wouldn't be upset. So Joe, what are you drinking tonight? Malt whiskey?
Actually, no. I'm drinking rum and Coke tonight. So a little misdirection there on the shirt, and then what I'm actually drinking. So yeah, drinking rum and Coke tonight.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. All right, so rolling into it tonight, just got 3 milestones that were hit this past week. Matt Olson hit home run number 200. Andrew McCutchen got that 400th double, which, as we said 2 weeks ago, it wasn't going to be long till he broke that one too. And Freddie Freeman joins the 2,000 hit club. So those are the most recent milestones. And I think that's going to be it for a little while for major ones. I think those were the close ones, if I remember right, from a couple weeks ago. So congratulations to those guys. It's absolutely awesome to see. And hope things keep going well for them. And anybody else who's getting close, keep pushing. It's a long season. Let's see some more milestones knocked off as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to see it. And we thought that was going to happen pretty quickly, and it certainly did.
Yeah, especially Freddie. And Ronnie just chimed in from the chat. So happy for Freddie and Ron. Me too, man. Me too. I'm always happy to see Freddie Freeman succeed and do well. Nothing bad ever from me about Freddie. Miss that guy. Can't wait till he signs that one-day contract when he's ready to retire so he can retire as a Brave. All right, so moving on to the London series. Now, this was a lot of fun, Joe. The baseball was pretty good. It was a really nice location. They did a great job with the stadium. Some uniform notes. Both teams wore home uniforms. Now, the Yankees and Red Sox also did this in 19. So this probably is going to be a tradition moving forward, I would think, that teams will always wear their home uniforms. Both teams wore the MLB World Tour patches on the right side of their caps. The Cubs wore a series-specific ad for Advocate Healthcare. To my knowledge, they do not have a permanent ad patch as of yet. The Cardinals kept their existing stifle ad, but this time it was consistently in the left sleeve instead of alternating. So it was at the batter's dominant arm facing forward for TV. I still hate ad patches, but if they make them consistent in one spot and not alternating, that would be a lot better. It would look better. The only thing I didn't like about with the Cubs wearing Advocate Healthcare is the Cubby patch was removed. But again, I don't believe it's a permanent ad, so hopefully we'll see the Cubby patch back. They both had the helmet ads for Capital One. Didn't like those, but if I'd honestly rather see them on batting helmets than see them on uniforms, because batting helmets I don't have to see when my team's hitting, and then I don't have to see it any other time.
Yeah.
Joe, there's an awesome time-lapse video on ESPN. It shows the transformation of West Ham United Stadium from a football pitch to a baseball field. I watched it probably 3-4 times. I'm a turf guy, so, watching the stadium transform, the new turf get laid out, I mean, that's just something I just enjoy in general. But they did a really nice job. And honestly, the amount of time that went into transforming the stadium was actually less than I thought it was going to be to get it MLB ready. I thought the field looked great. It didn't seem like the players had any complaints. It seemed like it wasn't causing an issue, like let's say the most recent Super Bowl might have, which for the record was not caused by the Tahoma grass. It's caused by ryegrass being wet that they overseeded it with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was cool video, and really, what a great presentation, honestly.
Yeah, some stats about the field for you. 144,000 square foot of artificial turf. 345 tons of infield clay. 4,000 tons of UK sourced aggregate. I'm guessing that's the. I'm not sure what that is for sure.
It's the base layer.
Yeah. And then 18-meter tall foul poles, which is kind of weird, but and anyway, they had and all the netting and everything in place. It's certainly weird to watch when you're thinking about what that field is normally used for, but really interesting from that standpoint. That there was a ton of bounce to it. It sounded like on the broadcast that some of the players were talking about how the ball was bouncing a little differently out in the grass or in the turf, but you're going to have that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and while it was different, it didn't cause 5 unforced errors in the game. So the players adapted to it pretty quickly. It looked like, plus with the extra day off leading in, I'm sure the teams got extra practice on the field to get themselves ready for new conditions they've never had before. And if I remember right, Joe, didn't they have all of the outfield wall distances both in English and metric?
I don't remember for sure, but I know that it was, I think, 335 down the lines, which is customary for what Wrigley is. I think 335 or 355 maybe. But 355. So they tried to match some stuff there. I think it was 395 to straightaway center.
Okay, a little bit shallow in center, but not bad overall.
Yeah, not bad. It was a little bit better than I think the Yankee one. I think it was a lot closer than that. I think it was somewhere around a 380 or 370. So there were a ton of home runs in that series. Not as many in this one.
No, definitely not. The offense was the Cubs offense was there, but the Cardinals decided to take a game off. So, you got one at least.
Yeah, more on those two games in a little bit here.
All right. So, Joe, what about some fun facts?
Yeah, Goldschmidt is now the first player in history to play in a regular season game at 5 different countries. He was involved in the Mexico game, this one obviously, Australia with the Diamondbacks, I believe, Canada, and then of course the U.S. So the journeyman, I guess you want to say, has been able to play in 5 different countries, and that's pretty remarkable. That's pretty cool for sure. The mascot race in this one included folks such as Freddie Mercury of Royal Guard, Winston Churchill, and Henry VIII comes out ahead in the mascot race.
I almost wonder if that had to be fixed because that's just too perfect.
Of course, he's got to come out ahead. I mean, he's rolled 7 of them. So, yeah, at Saturday's game, they had a crowd of 54,662, the highest of any game all year. And they had, honestly, the average crowd on Saturday throughout the league was 37,995. There were 8 crowds throughout the major Saturday with 40,000 plus. So, much like we talked about last week, attendance is certainly up.
Yeah, and it's really good to see that has continued. I'm not at all surprised to see that it continued through the Stadium Series. If it hadn't, I would have been really surprised. But given the popularity of how much baseball has been growing in England, and especially with their performance in the World Baseball Classic this year, I know they're not a team that's going to be pushing for a semifinal spot, probably not within the next 2 cycles of it at least. but the team had a pretty decent showing. And, that's all it takes to really get a game to start growing. Think about our women's soccer team winning World Cups really sparked growth for soccer in the United States. So I would not be shocked to see similar growth for baseball in England. One thing I would like to see next time we have a World Baseball Classic is I would like to see England have some better freaking uniforms, because their uniforms were bland, boring, and full of letters literally falling off the uniform during play. So hopefully they could step that up for the next one.
Hopefully none of them lost the T.
Got thrown in the harbor in Boston.
What can I say, man? What can I say?
Hey, it's almost the 4th of July. These jokes are just going to keep coming.
They write themselves, man. They write themselves. The obvious shirts were on point for this one, for this series, because there was one that says, "I'd rather go to London than St. Louis." So, it's funny. The teams that are 300 miles apart, if that, travel 4,000 miles to play each other.
And really well traveled too. There were a ton of fans I saw from both teams at that game. Now, I'm sure some of them were native Englanders that were there, but I'm sure there was a pretty sizable contingent of people from both cities that made the trip as well. I mean, how could you not? If you have that money to burn, that's a great trip to take.
Oh yeah, and Cubs fans travel pretty well, so yeah, I think it was exciting to see some of it. I saw most of the game Sunday. I didn't see much on Saturday, but
Ron just commented in Goldschmidt for Philly. Ron, that ain't happening. That there is no chance in hell you're going to see Goldschmidt sent to Philadelphia for anything. Good luck. Move Harper to first base.
They're going to get somebody at the deadline for sure for first base. It's just a matter of who it is. But yeah, I mean, look, a lot of fun. The attendance, obviously, and then of course there's some things that are off to Cooperstown from this weekend's series. Arenado's jersey from Sunday to honor the Cardinals, traveling to London and becoming the first home team to win in these games that are international. Goldschmidt's hat for being Mr. Worldwide and well-traveled. The baseball thrown by Adam Wainwright on Saturday was sent to Cooperstown. I didn't quite understand that, considering it's not the first time they've played there. Like, I don't really think that there's too much. Look, you're going to make something out of everything, but I think it's just like, to me, if this was the first time they were playing in London, I'd have a little bit more understanding of that.
It might be because they weren't sure if they were going to be able to pull this off. I mean, remember, this game was supposed to be played back in 2020, and it got canceled because of the pandemic. So
Right.
Maybe they did it because, hey, we were able to pull this back off, start the series back up again, despite all of the challenges to do so. Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
unless they're going to keep every first pitch from all the London series going forward, which go for it, but that's kind of an odd thing to continuously keep, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thought was. It's like, if this was the first one in London, I get it. When they go to Paris in a couple of years, that would make sense to me. But when you're already playing there, kind of, you've already done it. And then the last thing was Ian Happ's batting gloves from Saturday. He had the 2-homer day, and actually he designed those gloves. They're made by Bruce Bolt. It's really a neat story with Ian Happ. He's certainly a special guy. I've certainly, fans of the show obviously know I think he's a great dude and a good athlete on top of it. So, he really embraces a lot of things.
All right, so sorry, I hit the wrong button there, Joe. I accidentally minimized my sheet. All right, so during the series, they announced that next year's teams are going to be the Mets and the Phillies. That'll be played on June 8th and 9th, continuing the tradition of we just want to keep traditional rivals for these games. Because remember, we have had Yankees, Red Sox, because of course they had to be first, and then we had Cubs, Cardinals, and now we've got Mets, Phillies. So yeah, we'll see where they go with it from here. I mean, if we're going to keep traditional rivals going, we'll see who's next after that. And then 2025 is likely going to include a game in Paris. The Yankees, because of course they've been lobbying to play in that game, but the league has not confirmed it yet. Rob Manfred has just said they are working out the logistics. And it should be noted that in the CBA that was just signed, the MLBPA did allow for a series to be played in Paris. So this will very, 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 very likely happen some point in the relatively near future. All right, so Joe, how about the series? What about the games?
Yeah, game one on Saturday. Um, they win this one. Cubs win this one 9-1. Justin Steele had himself a whale of a ball game. Pitched really really well. Let me 6 innings, 5 hits, 1 run, 9 strikeouts, and a walk. Against as bad as the Cardinals have been against that lineup, that's not easy to do. So more power to him. Ian Happ, as we talked about, had 2 homers in this game. Nick Madrigal had an RBI single. Morel had an RBI single. Gomes had a nice day too. Talkman had a good day. Everybody seemed to be clicking. Goldschmidt drove in the only run for St. Louis in the bottom of the 6th on an RBI. And Wainwright got the wrong side of this game. If he doesn't pitch, not to say that it's for sure, but if he's not involved in this game, it's a 2-1 game maybe. So he certainly didn't have his best stuff, and he admitted as much in post games. He says, they came to see a great game, and I didn't deliver, and if I didn't pitch, this would have been a better ball game. So, he certainly owned it. Not that I don't think he had to really be that hard on himself. I mean, things have been hard enough for St. Louis, but he wore it on the chin. He's like, I didn't bring it. I didn't deliver, and the fans came to see a good game, and that just didn't happen. Can't say I'm disappointed by that, but I can appreciate the brutal honesty from Wainwright. Game 2, the one I saw Sunday yesterday. First off, before we get into the game, ESPN, if you're going to do this, put your A team on this. Don't make me listen to Michael Kay and A-Rod for 3 hours or 2 hours. It's freaking ridiculous, okay? I can't stand A-Rod to begin with. And Michael Kay is, Like, if you're going to have the Sunday game, then have your A team on the Sunday game. As good or bad as that A team is. I don't care for the way ESPN does their broadcast with all the different interruptions and things. It's just annoying. So it didn't start off on the right foot. Not only was my internet out at the house, so I'm watching on my cell phone, but then I got to listen to Michael Kay and A-Rod, and I'm like, well, that's just terrific, wonderful. But back to the game.
That's awful.
Yeah,
that's awful.
Yeah, back to the game. The Cubs start off this game. They get they're up 4-0 after the first inning, and then in the second inning, a awful error by Mancini. He booted this ball at first base somehow or another, and a run. Ended up scoring 3 runs because of that one error and making it a much closer game. Stroman wasn't his sharpest. He had a blister. He left the game for that. They don't think it's anything more than that, and the blister hadn't popped yet, so that might be a little bit better as far as recovery time goes. But the Cubs had this game won, and then it just kind of let it slip away. It's just disappointing to have some of that happen, but they tried to get everybody in the game. It wasn't terrible for a series, and it was like you said, it was fun baseball to watch, fun to watch them play um, in London there. Um, More on the rest of this week in a minute, but look, baseball did a great job with these one-offs and these series. They do a great job with it. It's entertaining television, at least from some of the other stuff that they're doing in the game itself. Um, so hat tip to Major League Baseball for getting these kind of things right. Um, and as much as we huff and puffed about rule changes, they certainly have paid off.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely true. And Joe, one thing we've pointed out multiple times in the show, if there's one thing MLB does really well, it's the one-off games or like the short series games. Whether it's Field of Dreams, whether it was the International Series to Mexico last year, whether it's the Little League game up in Williamsport every year. This series in London, MLB does a good job showcasing a good product when it comes to these special game opportunities, and definitely on display here. And I hope they continue to do that, and I really hope they get down to ESPN's ass about such a god awful broadcast and crew on Sunday because Jesus, you nailed it. Nobody wants to listen to A-Rod for 3 hours. I don't think Yankees fans want to listen to A-Rod for 3 hours.
Well, and they have to do it every other weekend when the Yankees and Red Sox are on, ESPN baseball. I just I don't understand. Like, if you're going to do that, why can't we have your best broadcast team on there? There's no reason that the Sunday night game has to get your best crew. I mean, this is your premier game of the day. And you throw Michael K and A-Rod out there? Seriously?
Yeah, that was let's just leave it at a very questionable decision. And yeah.
Yeah. But going back to the beginning, we'll go back to the beginning of the week for the Cubs. They went 8-0 on Monday against Pittsburgh. They sweep the Pittsburgh series. Had an excellent start from Drew Smiley in this one. 5 innings, 3 hits. The 5 walks are a little troubling, but 4 strikeouts and no runs came out of it. So you don't get too disappointed with that. And the bullpen pitched really well for 4 innings, only 2 hits across those innings and 1 walk. So a great pitching performance as a whole for the Cubs, which is exactly what they needed to start off the week. Michael Tauchman has been on a tear for the last probably 3 weeks or so, and has sort of become a household name. They're coming up with all sorts of, nicknames for him in Chicago and all these other things, and it's fun to see. So as much as I was like, really, who's this Michael Tauchman guy? He's really taken advantage of his opportunity and had a great go of things. And then Tuesday's game, they win this one 4-0. Stroman on the hill, so they had, obviously Stroman's been pitching out of his mind, and at some point they got to have this heart sit down and figure out if they're going to keep him or not. Ricketts was blowing all the smoke in London, talking about how they're going to be buyers and this and that, but we'll see. Stroman pitches 7 innings in this game, 5 hits, no runs, 5 strikeouts. And Leiter and Alzolay finished off the game. Tauchman had a solo homer in this one. And then the Wednesday game, the Cubs win this one 8-3. Professor on the hill for that, gets the win. Quietly, he's had 3 wins already this year, which seems weird because took him a while to get here. 6 1/3, 2 hits, 3 runs, 3 walks. But overall, a good week for the Cubs. I can't complain. 4-1, and there's some things that have to be figured out. this first base situation has to be addressed. The third base situation, what you're going to do with Morel as far as his regular position goes. So I look to see where sort of things go. But yeah, no major complaints. Sorry, I ran a little long there, but I think there was a lot to cover with the Cubs this week.
No, that's all right. It was a good week for the Cubs. While you were talking, Jason chimed in. Bring Goldie to Philly. May the Fightins finally beat the Cubbies. Jason's going to take more than Goldschmidt for the Phillies to beat the Cubbies this year. Not the way they've been playing. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's this matchup coming up early this week. It's a lot like what the Phillies were dealing with last week to start their week coming in against Atlanta when you had two hot teams just ramming into each other. I don't know that Goldschmidt would be enough, although, Jason, here's the thing for you. Harper's going to be able to go in the field back at first base before he can get to the outfield. So you don't want to get Goldschmidt because that means Harper's going to be stuck at DH and Schwarber's going to stay in the outfield. We'll get into more of that later, but I don't think the Phillies fans want Schwarber in the outfield any longer than he absolutely has to be. But yeah, no, Joe's a very, very good week for the Cubs. I'm glad to see the London series went well for him, even if it was a split instead of a sweep. All right, so let's move on to fantasy baseball. And in the DDAB Fantasy League last week, it was a very, very, very good week for the two hosts that decided to show up tonight and not have to go day to day because of an illness. Oh, Ronnie said, screw Kyle, trade his ass. I mean, honestly, Phillies fans, I don't blame you for saying that. I really don't. So looking at the standings, it was a good week for Joe and I. My team, Acuna's Boomas, knocked the ever-loving snot out of Ronnie Schmidt-Happen's team 19-7. Joe, you once again took Jason down. Happy and Hornsby went 14-10 over Turner and Chooch. The updated standings, Jason is still holding on to a very slim lead. I'm a game and a half behind him now. Joe, you have jumped all the way up to 10 games behind him, so this is definitely going to be continuously fought through the rest of the season. And poor Ronnie's down 42 and a half games back. He was making waves for a little bit, but it seems like Ronnie needs to make some moves, man. Because I just that was a great week, and there were some categories that were close, but there were not enough close categories that would have swung back too significantly in his favor. I had two big MVPs last week. I think number one, of course, obviously Ronald Acuna, as he has been all season. But I also want to give a huge shout out before I get to the Braves Reds, but I want to give a huge shout out to Ellie De La Cruz. As much as it sucked to watch him complete the cycle in only 4 at-bats against Atlanta, at least I had him in my starting lineup, so I got the cycle knocked out quickly and added to my stat list, and that definitely helped me pull away in quite a few things there. That kid is phenomenal, and I'll wax more poetics about him later, but he is going to be a good player for a long time. Joe, man, you and Jason, man, here's what he had to say, man. He said, fucking Joe, man. I can't beat this dude. My team is definitely in a slump. Nobody's hitting. Nobody's pitching. Lots of hours, or rather closer tied. I need a rebound against Ron because I've got 4 losses overall, and 3 of them have been to Joe. Joe is my Miami Marlins. And Joe, I don't think Jason could have given you higher praise than calling you his Miami Marlins for fantasy.
Yeah, that's certainly big praise coming from Jason. That's for sure.
Jason's clearly not too happy about that with the blah 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 comment, but meh.
Listen, a ton of these categories were within 1 or 2. Like this was not by any means a shellacking or a beatdown by any means. This was back and forth all day yesterday, and I'm like, watching really closely. I think we had two games. Jason had 2 guys left, and I had 1 guy left. I think in the Sunday night game, and it was like, uh oh, like this went down to the wire. Jason had himself a pretty, not a terrible week. I don't think offensively he had a pretty good week. There's just a couple of things one way or the other. Pitching was more in my favor. I didn't win the hold category. No, neither of us did. So that breaks my streak of that. But look, a good week overall. Just again, things were within one or two of each other pretty much the whole week. So just got enough luck. Hap started hitting again, and some other guys hitting again. So it just a matter of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantasy baseball. That's fantasy, if anything. That's how it's going to roll. Ron said, "Hey, I'm playing just like the Mets right now." Well, Ron, at least you're doing better than the Nationals, although that's not saying much because the way the Mets are playing, they're going to catch the Nationals in the basement pretty soon. Jason said we tied in homers and other random ones that are tied that tied are rare. And so, yeah, it was it was a good week. I was watching your matchup almost more than I was watching my matchup because I just ran away with that so early with all the Atlanta out, offense I had ties. Oh, Jason meant to say ties. Gotcha. Okay. So sorry about that, Jason. Type quicker next time, man. All right. So let's Joe, let's roll it on. All-Star game phase 2 balloting is just started today at noon. And the way that's going to work is that the phase 2, and just to make sure I have all of this right because they changed it last year. So this goes from today until 12 o'clock noon Eastern time on Thursday. You can vote once per 24-hour period. Vote totals from phase 1 do not carry over to phase 2, and the phase 2 voting determines the starters for the All-Star game. And those are going to be revealed on June 29th at 7 p.m. on ESPN. Surprised they didn't delegate that to the MLB network. So, all right. So, Joe, who are our finalists in the American League for starters?
Yeah, catcher, no surprise here. Adley and Jonah Heim, both on my fantasy team, coincidentally.
Yeah, I noticed.
At first base, Vlad Jr. and Yandy Diaz, your finalists there. Finalists at second, Marcus Simeon and Whit Merrifield. At third, Josh Jung, Matt Chapman. Short, Bo Bichette and Corey Seager. A lot of Texas-Toronto matchups in the finalists here. So their fans and fans of the game in general have been respecting what's been happening in both those places. In the outfield, your 6 finalists here: Aaron Judge, Mike Trout, Rosarena from Tampa Bay, Jordan from Houston, Kiermaier from Toronto, and Garcia from Texas. And your DH by being the top vote getter, Shohei. There's no other finalists there.
Yeah, I do like that the top vote getter from each league is automatically slated in as the starter at their position. I do like that. That's I think a good change that they made to the voting process. You saw a lot of guys from one team in the American League. You're going to see a lot of guys from one team in the National League too. Looking at catchers, it's Atlanta Sean Murphy and Dodgers Will Smith. I do have Smith on my fantasy roster. Thank you very much. At first base, Freddie and Matt Olson. So former Atlanta versus current Atlanta. At second base, Luis Arias. Oh my God, I am so mad I didn't pick him up. I almost did. And then Ozzie Albies of Atlanta at third base, Nolan Arenado versus Austin Riley, Cardinals Braves there at shortstop. Orlando Arce, which I am so glad to see that the fans did give him votes despite his time off for the injury after he had the microfracture in his wrist. And then also Francisco Lindor of the Mets, who's at this point, Joe, I think going to be the Mets. Hey, you have to have a representative in this game, guy, because I can't think of, other than maybe Alonso, I can't think of anybody else who would make it for them this year. In the outfield, your automatic starter is Ronald Acuna. He was the top vote getter in all of baseball, 3,082,600 votes. Other outfielder finalists, Mookie, Corbin Carroll, and Loris Gurriel Jr. of the Diamondbacks, and then Michael Harris of the Braves as well. For the record, Joe, I do not expect Michael Harris to slip in. I don't think he should. He is coming on now, but he had a really, really dirt slow start to the season. And then at DH, JD Martinez and Bryce Harper. So, Joe, really the biggest surprise I saw in all of these, and this is partially because of Acuna getting top vote in the NL, was that Castellanos did not make the finalists for starter. And once again, I'm really hoping that if they say the Phillies only get one guy, I really hope they give to Castellanos over Harper. Castellanos has been consistent with them since the beginning of the year. Harper obviously came back from injury. And again, like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm not trying to take anything away from Bryce Harper from the season he's having, because considering the limited time, he is having a good season so far. But Castellanos is playing like vintage Castellanos, the guy who we remember from the Reds destroying left-handed pitching and just annihilating everybody else that he came up against. So I really would like to see him make it. I hope the manager, I hope they have a spot to give him, because he has definitely earned it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to figure that out. I mean, part of this is the Diamondbacks have just been that good.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think he should be on ahead of anybody other than maybe Harris. Although, like I said, Harris has been coming on lately. So, voting is current. He's hot right now. That tends to translate with the voting. Plus, Atlanta's got a ton of fans that just vote constantly. I see it in every social media group that they make sure they have people reminding people to get out and do their all-star balloting every freaking day. I don't need to be reminded. I vote, although they probably wouldn't be happy that I did not vote straight Braves in my ballots this year. I made my honest gut calls on who I thought were the best players this year. I did not send in a homer ballot like I normally do.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to sort of, I think, be realistic about it, and I think guys like us can be, because we're looking at we're looking at different players every week. So I'm not surprised by any of the positioning that's here. I do think that if Tampa Bay doesn't have a starter, that's pretty either good for the American League because everybody's so good, or it's bad because, I mean, that team has been on fire from the jump.
Yeah. I think Yandy Diaz should honestly get the start over Vlad Jr., but I think Vlad's popularity is going to keep him ahead in that one. Keep in mind, too, the fans don't do the voting for pitching. McClanahan should make the team. He might even be their starter. I haven't really taken a close look at the American League stat rankings lately, but he's definitely going to be in consideration. I know Garrett Cole is going to be. I have him on my fantasy squad, so I know how well he's been doing this year. So Tampa's definitely going to get some guys in. They may get more pitchers in, which, considering how good their offense has been, is almost a disservice to those guys. But it kind of checks out with how Tampa Bay has traditionally been built as a pitching first team, and then the offense just kind of gets filtered in as they go. All right, so that's the All-Star Phase 2 balloting. I did send my ballot in earlier today, and again, this is unlike Phase 1. It's one ballot per 24-hour period, so once a day. And that goes until Thursday. So, and the other thing I like about the shorter period, Joe, is it doesn't let these huge fan bases stuff the ballots as much, so to speak. So
yeah.
It's a more true test of who is the better player at this point in the season. All right, let's get into some fun. We'll start with Braves Phillies, because of course we will. Coming in last week, Atlanta had one of the most ridiculous schedules I think I have ever seen MLB throw their way. I mean, they had the Phillies first. The Phillies were coming in on a winning streak. And then they had the Reds, who were also coming in on a longer winning streak than Atlanta was coming in on. So it was literally a clash of the Titans last week for Atlanta. And man, it was a good week. So game one, you have two hot teams, 6+ game winning streak walked in and outwalked a 4-2 Braves victory behind a more typical Spencer Strider than we've seen over the last couple weeks. 6 innings, 8 hits, an earned run, no walks, 9 strikeouts. His fastball velocity was back up. It was back around 97.5. He induced a whiff on 13 of the 20 swings taken against his slider. Those are great numbers right there. Iglesias did allow a run in the ninth, but held on for his 10th save. He had home runs from Riley off Suarez, Olson off Vasquez, and Rosario. Dude, Eddie Rosario has been blistering hot in June. And he had a double in the game. Acuna has 31st stolen base of the season. My biggest Phillies takeaway in this game is that they squandered multiple opportunities. They left 5 runners in scoring position with 2 outs. They went 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. They left 8 guys on base total. Now, I'll grant you, Atlanta left 9 on. They went 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position, but they had 2 opportunistic homers. You don't always want to rely on the home runs, but, you can't say no when they come. Marsh had a great game for the Phillies, 3 for 4. He had a run scored and a double. Ranger Suarez actually pitched really well in that game. 6 innings, 4 hits, a run, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. Shocker of shockers, the Phillies bullpen could not keep the Braves offense back. And the Phillies offense, they just came on too little too late. Before the game, somebody asked Spencer Strider if he was more mad at the Phillies because of the NLC or the NLDS outing last year, and he said, "I want to beat everybody. I dislike every opponent equally. No offense to them, but that's how you've got to play the game. If you're not wearing my jersey, then we're fighting for food." Great quote. Great quote. Game 2 got rained out. We're going to make that up on September 11th because, God forbid, we have a doubleheader in this series, I guess. I don't know. And, that was another game that took MLB forever to decide to call that game when the weather forecast was pretty damn clear that there was no shot in that game being played. Joe, you've mentioned this on Read the Room a couple times now with these weather delays where we know well enough in advance that we should just call the damn thing and be done with it.
Yeah, you don't want to, you have these fans sitting there waiting for things to be decided, and it's just like at some point it's almost better if you aren't able to even start it, to just be like, you know what, if we can't start it, if the field's not good enough to start it, it's not going to improve.
No, especially when you're talking about the kind of rain that we had in Philadelphia last Tuesday night. That was intense.
Yeah. It's one thing if you're able to at least start the game. It's another thing entirely if you can't start the game.
Yeah.
Then the field's not good enough never going to be good enough to play on. And it's idiotic to make fans sit around for 2 hours when it's clearly not going to let up.
Yeah. And, Philly is a great draining field. When Citizens Bank opened up, it was state of the art for how many gallons per minute that field could drain. And that's great for the grass. I don't think the dirt drains as quickly. They still have to throw a ton of that drying agent down the dirt every time it rains, just like every other ballpark. And just because you can make the field drain enough doesn't mean it's not going to be too slippery for play. And as you pointed out, why make the fans suffer? Because let's face it, Philly does not have a ton of covered concourse areas in that stadium. It's a very open concept, which I love. Probably 98% of the time. And the 2% of the times that I don't love that setup is when it rains, because you've got a lot of people crammed into a really tight space. And I know we're not in peak COVID, so that's not as big of a concern, but let's face it, I worked in healthcare. That's always going to be in the back of my mind. Large crowded spaces are just not something I'm fond of. All right, then moving on to game 3. That was a phenomenal pitching duel. Bryce Elder and Aaron Nola were throwing zeros all night. Joe, these lines are great. Elder, 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 6 Ks. Nola, 6 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 5 Ks. Bryce Harper, when they interviewed him after the game, he had nothing but good things to say about Bryce Elder. He said, quote, I think he's got good stuff. It feels like he's going to be a really good pitcher. If the Braves get into the postseason, he's going to be really good for them, I think, just because he has no heartbeat. He's very slow out there. He knows what he's doing. He's, what Harper's saying, he's really methodical. He knows how to control the pace of the game, even around the pitch clock. And I think Harper makes a great point about that, because pitchers are finally starting to figure out ways to manipulate the time clock in their favor. I saw it was last week. Pitcher ran with bases loaded on a full count. He, with 2 outs, the pitcher knew the runners were going to break. So he ran the clock down to 1 and then spun around and threw a pickoff move as the runners started to run, and got the inning ending in a rundown. It was great. That's good pitch clock manipulation. So Atlanta's 8th straight victory. Harris broke the scoreless tie with a 10th inning single and then scored when Schwarber booted what should have been the 3rd out on Riley's 2-out line drive. I mean, the damn ball hit him in the glove. That's a little league level. You should have made that catch. When you're making that many millions of dollars a year, you need to make that catch. The Braves, having the opportunistic offense that they do, immediately capitalized it when Ozuna blasted a 2-run homer. In the 10th inning, both Harris and Acuna stole bases in this one, both off of Marte in the 10th inning. Elder's season ERA after this game, Joe, dropped down to 2.4, which is second best in the NL, not first. He's hoping to be selected for his first All-Star game appearance. Honestly, I really hope he makes it. He's definitely putting up the numbers to make it. The Phillies, they need Harper to be cleared to get back in the field, even if they have to put him at first base, because they need to get Schwarber's ass on the DH and out of the outfield. He is such a liability out there. He also bobbled a ball in the 6th inning, and according to StatCast, both that ball and the one he dropped had a 95% catch probability. 95%, and he booted 2 of them. He's second to last in baseball with negative 10 outs above average. That's from StatCast. And he's dead last, negative 16 defensive run scores, and that's per Fangraphs. I mean, that's awful, man. And even if Harper's at first base, you put Pache in either center field or left field, because Pache is a great defensive outfielder. I think I read they'd probably keep Marsh in center field just because he doesn't have a lot of experience playing the corner, and that's fine. Pache can play anywhere in the outfield. Jason's thoughts, Joe. The Phils should have had at least one of those. Instead, they wasted a strong Nola start and literally dropped the ball. Schwarber needs to be at DH ASAP. And Jason's right. Joe, didn't I harp on this a bunch last year about the Phillies outfield defense?
Yeah, you beat that dead horse all the time, but
can I finally say I'm justified in doing so?
No, I mean
that was awful.
The rest of that outfield is pretty dang good, so I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, I still like Castellanos in left field better than I like him in right, because he doesn't have a great arm. But either way, at least he can catch the ball that's hit right at him in his glove.
Yeah, look, I'm always gonna be a Schwarber guy, at least to some extent, but I can't, I can't excuse what happened this week. I think he certainly should be. He's obviously a better hitter than he is anywhere else. But I mean, you keep in mind that he was a catcher up until he left college. So it wasn't until he made it to the minors that they moved him.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. He's not playing his natural position. And there's a good reason for that, because his arm sucks.
You're talking about a guy who has only been playing the outfield for 6 years and spent the rest of his entire life playing catcher. I mean, it's certainly not easy to do, and clearly his bat makes all the difference in the world for him. I mean, I'm always going to be have a soft spot for Schwarber, being an Indiana grad, a Cub player. Miraculously came back just in time for the World Series in 2016. Look, but yeah, you certainly can't have that. Not if you're going to try and contend. You can't put up with it.
And also, we talked about this earlier this year. They moved him back in the order, and he did better. And now Thompson has him right the hell back at leadoff again, and he's batting 192. He either hits a home run, a double, or nothing. And a lot of times that nothing is a strikeout. Why do you have a guy hitting 192 batting leadoff? I don't care about the power potential because he's hitting 192. So really, that means he's not actually making that big of an impact. He did so much better when he was farther back. So when he hit those home runs, there was a chance that he'd have guys on base around him so he could actually pick up some RBIs with that power of his. I don't get it.
It's the same thing the Cubs dealt with when you had, Nick Madrigal up top for a little bit. You had Mike Tauchman, who still is hitting well, but still didn't start off well and was hitting leadoff for who knows what reason. But too much lineup manipulation is a bad thing. I mean, we talked about that a lot with Rojas for the Mets a couple years back. It makes a difference. Routine makes a difference. And if something is working, don't change it just because you feel like it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move on. We'll do the Braves Reds before we go back to Phillies Mets. I know you and I are going to have a little fun with that one. So once again, like I said, Atlanta comes into a series. You got the two hottest teams in baseball crashing together. Game one was a slugfest. And Joe, I'm going to mention something. I'm not really going to talk about pitching because there was no pitching in this damn series from either team. As you know very well, the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati is a very well-known hitter's launch pad. And boy, did it live up to that this series. Game one, Atlanta dropped that one 11-10, back and forth slugfest. Joey Votto in only his fourth game back, because of course he did. Freaking Votto. 2 home runs, the game-tying home run, and then a go-ahead 3-run home run. The rookie phenom, Ellie De La Cruz, like I mentioned earlier, he hit for the cycle, and he did it in his first 4 frickin' at-bats. The first Reds player to hit for a cycle since 1989, Eric Davis. Because, we all think about Eric Davis when we think about great Reds players. Braves pitching, not able to hold leads. They had a 5-0 lead. They had a 7-5 lead. Now, that said, they nearly mounted their own rally. They were down 11-7 in the 6th before coming up a run shy. It was the 5th straight come-behind win for the Reds. That is their MLB leading 27th come-from-behind lead win of the season. 27 already. Holy crap. That's over half their wins. That's nuts. This is the longest winning streak that the Reds have had since 1957. Here's our home run count. For the Braves, d'Arnaud had a 3-run shot. Olsen had 2 home runs, a solo, and a 2-run. Acuna had a solo. Riley had a solo. Reds got a 2-run shot from Fraley, a 2-run shot from De La Cruz. Votto had the solo and the 3-run shot. And the home runs just continued. Game 2. 7-6 win for the Braves. That broke the Reds' 12-game winning streak. They interviewed Snicker before the game, and he said, quote, "I told bench coach Walt Weiss, I feel like we're at Coors Field here. I don't feel safe with the lead, and I never feel like we're out of it with a deficit. Someone can pop one up, and it's over the fence. You never feel good until it's over." And boy, was he right about that. Travis d'Arnaud had a homer for the second straight day. That matched a career-high 4-hit performance. Olsen had a homer for the second straight day. Ozzie and Ozuna had homers. They've hit 21 home runs over the past 6 games the Braves have. First MLB team to do that since they did it last year, June 10th through 15th, which is just insane to think about. They've also hit at least 4 home runs in 4 of their last 6 games. The first time a team has done that since the Cubs did that back in September 10th through 15th of 19. Braves, the first team this season, have 4 players with at least 15 home runs. Both Albies and Acuna stole bases. The Reds had homers from McClain yet again, Steer, Fraley, and Benson. And, of course, Iglesias, because nothing's going to be easy in the series. Back-to-back homers in the 9th, but held on for save number 11th. In the finale, it was another tight one, 7-6. A ton more offense yet again. Olsen his 4th home run of the series, moving into a tie with Shohei Ohtani for the MLB lead at 25. Now, Joe, I never thought I was going to say that about anybody on the Braves. We're going to hold an MLB home run lead with Shohei Ohtani anywhere outside the first month of the season. So holy crap, Olsen is, when he is hitting, it is going a long way. And he had 2 deep shots to left in that series too. So he's hitting all over the park right now. He's also up to 60 RBIs, which leads the NL and is one behind Ohtani for the MLB lead. For the Reds, once again, McLean had another home run. All 6 games Atlanta played against the Reds this year, 1-run games. For the series, the 2 teams combined for 19 home runs, which matched a series record for a 3-game series in Cincinnati. And Iglesias did manage to pick up his 12th save. The Braves ended the game. They turned a really, really beautiful 5-4-3 with the infield in because of runners on the corners. So like that ball hit to Riley was smoked, and he just snared it and turned a beautiful double play. So, Joe, what I mentioned during the Braves Red series earlier this year when they were still down in the dumps, not really picking it up yet, was that this is a scrappy, persistent team that is going to get better when Votto comes back. I think I nailed that one.
Well, they were on a roll before he got there, but yeah.
It can only help to have Joey Votto back.
Yeah, because as we know, if Votto doesn't swing, it's not a strike.
Never a strike.
So
good. I got to tell you, my blood pressure is really glad that series is over.
you know what? Great, huge number of offense runs in that series, but I much prefer something a little more manageable or one-sided than that. Holy cow!
I was hoping for one pitcher's duel, maybe. Nope. The Great American Ballpark had other ideas.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was one of the most fun series I have watched all season. I'm still glad it's over because, good God, I think the pitchers were just from both teams were happy to put that series behind them and move on. Acuna stole 5 bases last week. He is doing his best Ricky Henderson impression right now, and he is doing it very, very well. He is an absolute terror on the base paths right now. I think he'd steal if Hunter Green would have not been hurt and pitched in the series, he probably would have stolen on a Hunter Green 102-mile-an-hour fastball and had a pretty good shot of making it. He's just, one thing I've noticed, Joe, about Acuna, he has gotten so good at reading the pitcher and getting a good jump. And that's huge.
Yeah,
all right. Sorry. Go.
No, yeah, I mean, he certainly has done a great job this week. So, and the whole year. So we'll see how that continues.
All right, so let's finish up the Phillies quick. They finished off with the Mets, and what probably should have been a Mets 2-1 series victory flipped right around because the Mets decided to Met in the last game. So for the series score, it was 5-1 Phillies in game 1, 4-2 Mets in game 2, 7-6 Phillies in game 3. As Jason said, it wasn't a great week for Philly, but not awful either. So these are Jason's thoughts. The Phillies took 2 out of 3, which is solid. Lost to Scherzer, which isn't awful. First series win against the Mets since 2021. Because remember, the Mets won every series against the Phillies last year and just crushed them all last year. So this had to feel really good for the Phillies psyche just to get that monkey off their back finally. And then on Sunday, the Mets themselves. They were down. The Phillies were down 6-4. Then the Mets walked in a run, hit 2 straight batters with the bases loaded to give Philly the 7-6 victory. And Jason was actually at the game on Saturday night. He got some really good pictures. But what really sucked was just how many Mets fans were there in the 400 level. As he and Karen left, Citizens Bank Park was filled with a "Let's Go Mets" chant, and the Phillies fans could not drown them out. So Jason was rather frustrated about that and was quite ticked off in that one picture he sent in the group chat that showed that huge block of orange and blue directly across the field from him. And we also noted that Jason does not have good luck going to games this year as a season ticket holder. The games he goes to, they seem to lose a lot more than they win. Although, as we pointed out a couple weeks ago, they did win the game where he took his dad to the Dodgers game where the Dodgers should have won that one, but the Dodgers Mets and lost that one. So, the Phillies, it could have been a much worse week for them. They took the Met series. And like we mentioned last week, I think we would have gotten all three. And I do not think Atlanta sweeps the series with the Phillies. I think they take 2 out of 3. But that said, I'm happy with how Atlanta performed. I think Jason should be happy with how the Phillies performed overall. It could have been a very, very, very bad week if they had. I think if they had lost that second game against the Mets and not pulled the series out, I think you're looking at a Phillies team that's not looking so good going into Chicago this week. So I think they should be, other than figuring out what the hell they're going to do with Schwarber, they should be pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean they're trending in the right direction. If it weren't for how hot the Braves are, it would be a totally different story for them. I mean they do just enough to win games, and it doesn't make a difference because the Braves continue to win. So um,
That's the crazy thing, Joe. The Phillies and the Braves have two of the best records in June, and the Phillies have lost a game and a half in the standings. That's insane because the Phillies have played lights out baseball in June, and they still lost ground.
well, I mean, they continue to waste big starts and big moments for guys like Aaron Nola, which you can't get where you are with that kind of stuff happening, and you know, unfortunately, they can't fire. I mean, they're not going to fire a manager this time, so they've got to figure some things out there as far as those big game situations where they're losing those, but they'll figure it out.
And one other thing to think about too, Joe, Atlanta's lightning hot right now, and they're doing it without Max Fried, and they're doing it without Kyle Wright. That's sick. That's absolutely sick.
That's scary, is what it is.
They're running 3 rookies right now behind
That's
Strider and
scary,
Morton,
man.
and things are working. It shouldn't be working like this, but well, when your offense can drop 10 runs at the drop of a hat, it helps.
Well, it certainly takes the pressure off those young guys because they don't have to be so pinpoint accurate. They can leave one over and not feel like it's the end of the world. Um,
Exactly.
and I think there's something to be said, obviously, for pitchers when you're going to get a ton of offense on a nightly basis. Um, you know that you can be a little more loose, you can be a little more free with what you're throwing, and take some chances that other pitchers can't.
Yeah, definitely. And Atlanta's going to get some arms back in the bullpen soon. Dylan Dodd should be coming back within the next week or two, I believe. And Jesse Chavez should be back by the end of the month, which is 4 days away. So it'll be good to see Jesse back out there and well rested too, because he has had a great season, and I'd love to see that continue. I mean, he's a guy that should be an all-star, but probably won't be because he's not a closing reliever. And, relievers that aren't closers tend to get overlooked for the all-star game, but he's got like a 193 ERA, man, which is unheard of for a reliever by the middle of June who's not a closer. So, all right, let's move it on, Joe. Who needs to read the room?
I mean, this goes without saying, but Rob Manfred makes the list this week.
When does he not?
Every week, probably, but he came out with some interesting comments this week. One of those being that granting the Astros immunity was probably not his best decision, quote unquote. Yeah, no crap, man. No surprise there. No Houston players were punished for the cheating scandal from 17 and 18, which doesn't make a ton of sense. At the manager and the GM were suspended for all of 2020 and eventually fired, but and draft picks were affected here. But as the Astros have shown, they didn't really need draft picks. I mean, they've got a ton of talent, so you know they probably should not have. They gave players immunity, and of course that you know limits what you're able to do, obviously, and there's a ton of Astros players who are never going to get a fair shake across the league, regardless of how good they are, because they were a part of that. And you're just going to say, well, they were a part of that. Just how good are they? How good were they? Obviously they've won a World Series since then, but you know, it's certainly something that he could have handled differently. Um, if you wanted to give certain immunity to certain guys who didn't have a ton of involvement, that's one thing. But to give blanket immunity to guys like Altuve, who clearly was doing something, um, you know, and stuff like that, you got to be selective with that kind of immunity. This is kind of the thing that, like, you're either going to punish everybody or you're going to punish nobody is kind of a dumb idea. A nuanced approach with the Astros would have made a difference in the eyes of a ton of fans. Um, and a nuanced approach is not to take this too far back, but a nuanced approach couldn't have hurt in 1919 and 1920, because there's no way in hell you can tell me that Buck Weaver and Shoeless Joe didn't play their ass off in the freaking World Series. You just can't tell me that. So
yeah, the numbers don't back that up.
Joe Jackson could hardly freaking read and write. So, not to relitigate that, but like this blanket immunity or blanket punishment is a dumb idea. I'm just glad he finally came around on that.
Now let's see if he can actually, take what he said, realize it, and use it in the future. That'll be the big test.
Well, nobody's going to hold him accountable for it. So, I mean, fans are back. Fans are showing up in droves now. So, I mean, he can apologize for it now. It's not going to make a difference.
Like, immunity is your biggest thing that you can offer someone who's reluctant to talk. Why would you just give it up? That's what I didn't understand at the time, and I still don't understand why you do that today. That has got to be the worst negotiating anybody has ever done in the history of the world, other than maybe when Atlanta sent Shelby Miller to the Diamondbacks and got Dansby back and got Ender back and all, Other than that, I can't think of any time where negotiations were handled more poorly than, oh, I'm just going to give you immunity. Go ahead. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. And then, of course, Manfred can't keep his mouth shut about A's fans. After the reverse protest a week or so ago, he said the A's fans' actions doesn't change in a decade worth of inaction. I'm sorry, dude. The rest of your quote means nothing. It's not the fans who have been inactive. It's ownership that's been inactive.
Yeah.
And that's clear. So just don't be stupid. This is ridiculous.
I will never understand why anybody thinks it's a good idea to blame the fans. It's not the fans' fault that ownership sucks that bad that the A's are leaving for Las Vegas.
Yeah, and don't try to say that you feel sorry for them and you hate to move. You made the call that you made. So don't tell me now you regret it. Fans weren't inactive, but fans also, even if they were,
the product hasn't been there.
They should be. I mean, what argument have I made week in and week out? You're not going to spend the money. Why the hell should I spend mine?
Exactly.
And Oakland fans may have done that for some time, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, that's not a major league quality product they're putting out in the field by any small stretch of the imagination.
No.
One other thing he apologized for was also in that same ESPN interview when he called the World Series trophy a piece of metal. When he was trying to justify everything with come on, dude. Great, you're apologizing 3 years later for saying something so stupid. Is it a piece of metal? Sure. All trophies are a piece of metal, but come on. That trophy means everything in the world to the team that wins it and to the fan base of the team that wins it that season. I'm sorry. Let's look at the Stanley Cup. arguably the greatest trophy in sports. No, it's not arguable. It's the greatest trophy in sports. Do you think any hockey player would ever call the Stanley Cup a piece of metal?
No.
No, no. They reverently lift that thing up and occasionally drop it and pour beer in it, drink beer out of it, and all sorts of other reverent and irreverent things to it. But that trophy's got a soul, man. Championship trophies have a soul. They are not just a piece of metal. And just come on, use your brain before you speak. I think we can pretty much sum up what Rob Manfred needs to do for the rest of his tenure as commissioner with that right there. Use your brain before you speak, or don't take interview questions until somebody has a chance to look over at them and write you a smart answer first. God, I hate our commissioner. What else you got, Joe?
Yeah, this White Sox Rangers game this week. The White Sox. I don't remember who was hitting, but I think Elvis Andrus was running the bases. Was clearly out by a couple feet at home plate, I think, and they challenge it. The tag was close, but still, they challenge this. He's clearly out, and MLB says, actually, no, Jonah Heim didn't set up properly. And you're like, didn't set up properly. Every aerial view you had of this play showed that he was giving him plenty of room to get in there. You can't force a catcher to see the entirety of the plate. And he gave him plenty of room to get in.
And the only reason he went over to the third base side is because that's where the throw went. And when the throw goes over there, by the rule, the catcher is allowed to be on the third base side.
Yeah, this was a complete botch by replay. It just didn't make a ton of sense to me. It's very equivalent to how people feel about NFL rules with process of the catch. Did he catch it or didn't he? Same thing here. Was he out or was he safe? It's not that hard to
no,
was he tagged before his foot touched home plate? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, he's out. Done.
Yeah, and it's not like the catcher was literally standing on home plate, preventing any way for him to try and slide in. He had the ball. He was dead to rights.
Well, I mean, during the play while he's waiting for the throw, he's on the back quarter or eighth of the dang plate.
Yeah, he was all the way over the first base side. Like there is nothing else he could have done to be less in the way of that play other than standing in the grass.
Yeah, this just seemed like a complete botch job from MLB. You're trying to throw the White Sox a bone, and trust me, they need them. But I'd rather win the right way than win because you screwed up a call.
And you remember, Joe, the play that was the biggest impetus to push instant replay into action for baseball was the perfect game that wasn't. When Jim Joyce badly screwed up the last call of the game and was seen in tears later because he realized how bad of a call he screwed up and that he wished he had replay. But you know what? Based on what we saw this past week, New York probably would have called that call correct.
Yeah, that one was a little.
I don't know what the hell they were looking at.
That one was a little more egregious. This one just seemed kind of like. It's one thing if an inning ends this way. It's another thing entirely when they get a walk-off win because of it. It's absolutely stupid.
Yeah, White Sox got completely gypped.
The White Sox benefited from it. The Rangers got gypped.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I flipped it. Sorry.
It's certainly not what you want. You don't want to see a game end this way. We want to see a game where, the throw is close, but it's just not there.
Yeah, exactly.
Not overturned on a replay that didn't make a ton of sense.
That was terrible. All right, Joe, any other read the room this week?
No, that's it.
That's enough, isn't it? All right, so let's move on. The last City Connect uniform of the season was released for the Pittsburgh Pirates. These are really not bad, Joe. The caps are yellow, black brim, supplement with a sublimated pattern. Jersey, it's a yellow jersey, PGH capitalized in the front. And the PGH, I did look this up. That's the abbreviation for the rail station, and it's the abbreviation that Pittsburgh people that folks from Pittsburgh would use for their city. They don't use Pitt. Pitt belongs to PIT. Pitt belongs to the airport. PITT belongs to the university. They look at PGH before they look at either of those. And there's a sublimated gradient that you'll never see from 5 feet away, but it's there. The name on the back is black, same script as the PGH, and the number on the back, again, that's black as well. Pants are all black with a single yellow stripe. There are 3 elements to the pattern. The first is the check, which is a reference to the checkerboard pattern on the city seal. Next is the asteroid, which is a type of hypocycloid, which is the shapes that are on the Steelers helmet that represent the steel industry. And finally, the upside down Y to represent the shape of the 3 rivers meeting together, the Allegheny and the Monongahela meeting the Ohio. And there's also a pattern sublimated in the chest lettering and the rear numbers that show the circular pattern from the pillars of the Clemente Bridge. Although, again, because it's on black numbers, you're not going to see that if you're more than 2 feet away from the uniform. So Jason's thoughts, the Pirate City Connect jerseys are decent. He loves the color scheme, the hat, the symbols, the meaning. Not terribly big on the giant PGH, but overall it's a solid design. Joe, what were your thoughts on the City Connect for the Pirates?
Yeah, I think it's a solid set. It's fairly clean, which I'm glad they're getting into more clean sets as opposed to busy with these uniforms lately. I think that's really been a nice change. Yeah, a solid set. I mean, I like the thought. What I really like about this is the thought that goes into it. But again, like you said, some of these other elements you're not going to see it unless somebody buys the uniform or you're sitting field level.
I like them. I think it's a good set. It's a clean looking set. I wish they would have brought back the pillbox hats, because when you think of pillbox hats in baseball, you always think of those 70s era Pirates teams. You always think of that.
Right.
I think that would have just tied the uniform together so nice. That black hat with the yellow stripes going around it, that would have looked great. That said, it's a good uniform. So Joe, it's the final City Connect release for the season. Where are you? We're not gonna look at the whole list. Jason's not here. I want him here to suffer the way through the entire list. So just looking at the uniforms released for this season, where do you put the Pirates uniform?
I'm trying to remember what all was put out this year. I know it was
Baltimore, Cincinnati, Texas, Atlanta, Pittsburgh. I might be missing one. Maybe not. Anyway, we'll just deal with those 5. If I'm missing one, so be it. It clearly wasn't a good enough design that I remembered it.
Yeah, honestly, I think I think Baltimore is probably 1 or 1A, and this is 1B or 2.
Okay.
I think they're the best 2 so far. As far as the cleanness of the uniform, the logic of it, there wasn't a whole lot to hate with either of those 2 unis. So,
well, and Baltimore already made a change to their uniforms. Instead of having that mosaic pattern be shown in a roll up, they sewed the roll up on so that it's always showing on the sleeves, which I think was a good change for that uniform. I still wish they would have put Baltimore in orange instead of white. Give it another little splash of color. But yeah, Baltimore, it's honestly, it's a good set. This is a good set. I liked most of the releases this year. I didn't like Texas. I still, to this day, you show me that hat logo for their City Connect uniform, and I couldn't tell you what the hell it is. Atlanta's is great, because it's based off one of my favorite throwback designs. I'm never not going to like that uniform. Even putting bias aside, I'm never not going to like that. I still, I was watching in the Braves Reds game. I was watching the red City Connect uniforms. I'm still not wild about them, to be completely honest with you. I didn't think they looked that great. I thought they were hard to read, and especially when when you're zoomed in, you can read it just fine. But when it's zoomed out to a reasonable level, you can't see it. A lot of that element goes missing. So for me, I'd put the Pirates in the top half. I wouldn't put them number one. I'll be biased to put Atlanta one, but they're definitely one of the top of the City Connects released for this year, in my opinion. Definitely one of the better designs overall. I think when we look back at the end, at some point later this year, when we rank everything we've had so far for City Connects, I think they're probably going to be top 10, top 15. They're going to be up there. They're not the best. I still think Miami probably has one of the best overall. When you look at, did they nail what City Connect is supposed to be and everything else? I still think that's going to be one of the best of all of them, but the Pittsburgh uniform should be pretty high up there as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. The cleaner the better as far as the look goes. Honestly,
Yeah, don't make it too busy. Like
yeah.
San Diego's, there's
Don't
too
make
much
it
going on.
don't make it too crazy that it's hard to enjoy it.
Yeah,
Make the nods to the city in a simple way that the fans will appreciate, and the casual observer who doesn't watch some of these clubs on a regular basis can go, you know what, that's a really good look.
yeah,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah. Like the Angels design, which didn't really get great reviews when it came out, but when I saw it on the field, that's what I liked about it. It was a simple design and everything made sense. It was, there was a lot of Anaheim, Los Angeles blended elements in it. I really loved the surfboard stripes in the one sleeve. I thought that was a great look, doing it asymmetrically to put it on the one side. Keep it simple. And for the 10 teams, because yes, there are going to be 10 uniforms released. Well, maybe 9 if the Yankees have their way and just skip the City Connect program. There are potentially going to be 10 uniforms released next year, which I'm surprised they didn't move 2 or 3 of them to this year just to break it up a little bit. But I know the Phillies are next year, and I know Jason has said a couple times he is both looking forward and not looking forward to what they're going to do with the Phillies. So, later this year when all 3 of us are back on, we will, maybe if we have an episode with some guests on too, just to get some outside perspectives, we'll put some rankings up and see what everybody thinks about how the Nike City Connect program so far.
Yeah, I think it's gotten better with age. It really has.
Yeah.
They've done a much better job this year of making it make sense, as opposed to just being an alternate.
Yeah, you're thinking like Wrigleyville and the Dodgers and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Diamondbacks.
The first year or so of this, they didn't really do a great job of making it, easy and palatable. They made it sort of forced, I think.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
I think that's really what it is. It was forced for the first year or so, and now it's more natural. It makes more sense. They're finding a way to make it, you know, uh, palatable, I guess.
All right. So, Joe, since Jason's not here, how about you do the down on the farm tonight?
Yeah, Jason's down on the farm hitter for this one. Jansen Witt, from El Paso Chihuahuas, which is the AAA affiliate of the Padres. This week, hit 545, 4 homers, and 10 RBIs, so had himself a heck of a week. Um, and
Great week.
and you certainly need to see that if you're a Padre fan. You need to see some of that minor league talent and see what it can do, as things happen and ebb and flow as they do with a team like that. So I'm sure they're happy to see that. And then the pitcher was Peyton Martin from the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes, the single A affiliate of the Dodgers. 1-0 on the week, 6 innings, 1 hit, 11 strikeouts. So had himself a pretty good start, and was impressive. Nonetheless, 11 strikeouts is still nothing to shake your head at. That's excellent.
That's a great week. Joe, sometimes I feel like Jason looks up obscure team names and then looks at the stats from the last week to see if somebody did well, just so either he or us have to pronounce some of these names. Because Cucamonga, I don't think we're ever going to be saying that again anytime soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's nice to see some different teams and what they're doing. But Jared Young from the Cubs had a pretty good week this past week in the minors. Too. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but I know he had a really good week.
All right, let's move it on to the hot list. Hot hitters for me this week. Number one, obviously, Ellie De La Cruz of the Reds, 440, 462, 880. 8 runs, 2 homers, 5 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 11 hits, 3 doubles, a triple, a walk, 5 strikeouts. Matt Olson of the Braves, 286, 375, 1.048. 7 runs, 5 homers, 9 RBIs, 6 hits, a double, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. Ronald Acuna Jr., 360, 385, 564 runs, a homer, 2 RBIs, but 5 stolen bases to go with 9 hits, 2 doubles, and only 1 strikeout on the week. And then Luis Roberts of the White Sox, 444, 542, 1.111. That's a lot of ones. 6 runs, 4 homers, 5 RBIs, 8 hits, a walk, and 2 strikeouts. Great week for those 4 guys. There were a lot of guys. Joe, I had a hard time with the offense this week. There were a lot of really good offensive performances. Any other hot hitters you wanted to mention?
Yeah, Anthony Santander from the Orioles, 381, 381, 952, a 1333 OPS, 5 runs, 8 hits, 4 homers. 8 RBIs and 7 strikeouts. The strikeout number is high, but when you're being aggressive like that, you're going to have that. So, and I think he and Julio got in a back and forth over the weekend. I think Julio robbed him of a homer, and then Anthony robbed Julio of a homer on Sunday. So
I love that.
it's pretty fun to see the guys get along like that. But he was the other addition I had to top hitters.
All right. And who is the Moneyball hitter of the week?
Yeah, Ketel Marte with the Diamondbacks. 8 runs, 9 hits, 1 double, 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, 4 walks, 6 strikeouts, 375, 483, 917, an OPS of 1400. Had himself a week. And as a big part of him, along with Corbin Carroll, are a big reason why the Diamondbacks are where they are.
Yeah, he had damn, that's a really good week. All right, let's move on to pitchers. My first pitcher is Yusei Kikuchi of the Blue Jays, 1-0 in 2 starts, 13 innings, 14 strikeouts, a very nice .69 ERA, a .46 whip, 1 earned run, 4 hits, 2 walks, and 1 home run allowed. Mad Max Scherzer of the Mets, 2-0, 16 strikeouts, a 1.93 ERA, .93 whip, 3 earned runs, 11 hits, 2 walks, 2 home runs. I had Yuri Perez of the Marlins. In 2 starts, he went 1-0, 12 innings, 18 strikeouts, 0 ERA, .67 whip, almost nice, 7 hits, 1 walk. And then I had Joe Ryan of the Twins because you don't see complete games very often. 1-0, 9 innings, 9 strikeouts, ERA of 0, and a .33 whip, giving up only 3 hits, no walks. Joe, any other starters for you this week?
No, you hit the 2 I had in Perez and Kikuchi. Scherzer needed this week because things have been extremely dicey, and the LFGM Mets fan page has been rather opinionated about this for quite some time. So, I mean, he needed a week like this.
Yeah, things haven't been going well for the Mets for quite a while. I was actually messaging Logan earlier today. Hopefully we can get him on maybe last week before we hit the All-Star break. And one of the things, his underlying things is the Mets are underachieving. They're a mess, and the other thing is he's worried that they're not going to be able to make a run for the wild card at this point. They're 14 back in the division. I mean, he's not ready to give up on the division because there's still a couple months to play and anything can happen. But they're also 8 games back in the wild card. I know it's June. I know we've got the whole second half to play, and they should have. There is enough talent on that roster that they should be able to turn things around. But things are not looking good in New York.
You have to wonder if Buck's going to get the axe. I mean, it couldn't hurt them. He just hasn't really seemed like he's that excited about being on the bench. His body language is just kind of like, does he care or doesn't he? You have a guy like Robertson, and I think he did this in the Sunday game with the Phillies. Like he waited until the Phillies took the lead to get Robertson up, and he's only pitched like twice in the last week or two or last couple of days. And a guy like Ottavino, who you were counting on to do some big things, you haven't used him in a while. So, I mean, what are you holding on to these guys for? So, look, it seems to me, and I don't know for sure, but I don't know what Logan thinks about this, but it just feels like, some of the guys have sort of checked out, but more so it feels like management has checked out.
Yeah.
And that's just the vibe I get. It seems like, you're getting a lot of the same issues you had with Luis Rojas, where you're having a mix-up of lineups, where you're not putting these young guys in and giving them a chance to get warm and acclimated and maybe be a spark. It just seems like he's not all that invested in it, and whether it's him or whether it's because Epler and analytics are running the joint, I don't know, but he just doesn't really seem like he's having. He's not fun Buck Showalter. He doesn't look like he's enjoying himself all that much.
No, he really doesn't. All right, so hopping ahead to the hot teams list. For the first time that I can remember in Dollar Dogs and Beer history, I do not have a team from the American League on this list this week. It's all National League. I've got the Braves, I've got the Marlins, I've got the Reds, the Cubs, the Giants, and the D-backs. And I'll be honest, Joe, I went back and forth with the Reds. Should I put them on? Should I not put them on? They did drop 2 of 3 to Atlanta. I left them on because they were coming off a 12-game winning streak, and because every game in that series was extremely tightly contested and well fought, that I'm willing to overlook the fact that technically for them, it was not a great week because that weekend series loss. Because I don't think anybody can argue right now, despite the results of the Braves-Reds series, that the Reds and the Braves are 2 of the hottest teams in baseball, regardless of how that came out.
Yeah, there's really not a ton of argument there. I mean, they're playing excellent baseball. The Reds, again, outside of the outcome, they've been playing really good ball and above expectations, I think, for most everybody. So it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with what the Braves were doing. They continue to be on this list because they just continue to play exceptional baseball. The Cubs are in the middle of one of those runs where they're on your list, but I just don't know how long that's going to last.
Hopefully a little bit. Hopefully
at least through this week. So
at least the first half of the week. If not the second half, I'm good with the first half. Joe, I was actually talking to Alex last week, and my brother, the big thing he said that you have been saying all along, he completely agreed with you. They need to figure out the Stroman thing, get him re-signed, and be done with it already.
Well, I mean, the problem with him is that he made it the story because he was like, well, they're not talking to me. And it's like, and then Cub fans are like, well, why aren't you talking to him? And then Hoyer's like, we're not, it's not that we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
But, when Stroman makes, Stroman is his own animal and he's his own worst enemy sometimes because he'll step in it occasionally. But it's just like, when players break the story, and sometimes they do that to put pressure on the organization. And look, outside of Sunday's game where he had a blister and maybe one other start this year, the guy has been the best pitcher in the entire National League, and his ERA shows it.
Yeah, without a
He's
doubt.
number one, if not. He and Steele are 1 and 3, I think, in the ERA conversation, or at least they were going into yesterday. So, it's not for lack of starting pitching. It's timely hitting that they haven't been getting. The fact that Bellinger can't play center field yet, is interesting, I guess. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and it's just kind of like we need to figure out what we're doing. And thank God for the weak NL Central, because otherwise this would be a decision would already be made. There'd be a lot of things happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because the Central is so weak, it's like we're not really sure what we're doing or where we're at. I think, if that makes sense, it just feels like in a stronger in a stronger NL Central, this decision's already over. But because the NL Central has been weak, they're only 3 games back going into today.
Yeah, you can't airmail it at this point.
No, you can't check out. You kind of have to weigh things and see where things go.
All right, so let's look at the week ahead. Atlanta is home all week. Thank God they've earned that after last week. 3 at home versus the Twins, Strider versus Gray, and that game is over. Atlanta took that one 4-1. Spencer Strider did pick up the win. Jason should be awfully happy with this game with it 7 innings and 10 strikeouts. Thank God I'm not playing him this week. And then tomorrow is Elder versus Ryan, and then TBD versus Maeda. And then Atlanta finishes the week at home versus Miami, Schuster versus Hoeing, Morton versus Perez. In the Sunday matchup, Strider versus Alcantara. There will be a lot of strikeouts in that game. I can call that one right now. For the Cubbies, they are home all week as well. 3 versus the Phillies, Tyone versus Suarez, Smiley versus Nola, and Hendricks versus Walker. That's gonna be a great series, man. Then 3 versus the Guardians, Steele versus Babi, Stroman versus Savale, and Tyone versus Williams. And the Phillies for the second half of the week, they've got 3 versus the Nats, which God knows they need to sweep here, at least 2 out of 3. Sanchez versus Gray, Wheeler versus Gore, Suarez versus Williams. Yeah, if you can't take 2 out of the 3 against the Nats with that kind of pitching, wow. Then the Orioles, 3 versus the Reds, Irvin versus Williamson tonight, and that is 2-1 Orioles right now in the bottom of the third. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that personally. Then Wells versus Abbott, Gibson versus Weaver, and then the Orioles finish the week with the Twins, Kremer versus Lopez, Bradish versus Ober, and Irvin versus Gray. So it's Joe. We got some good matchups this week. We pointed out last week the Braves, the Cubs, the Phillies really do not have many breaks rolling into the All-Star break this year. The Phillies have one of the few with the Nationals in the second half of the week. Joe, what are you thinking Phillies and Cubs this week?
Look, I think the Phillies are not a bad team. The Phillies have had customarily good luck at Wrigley. So I'm expecting a good series between the two teams here for the first part of the week. I'll be happy with 2 out of 3. I'll be, happy with the sweep, but I don't expect that, obviously, and I don't think Jason does either. I'd be happy with 2 out of 3, and if that game is competitive, if we go 1 of 3 and the games are competitive, I'm not going to be too disappointed with how they're playing. Of course, I want 2 out of 3 there. I'm really interested in the weekend series, how Steele does, sort of what the story is with Stroman and what that does with the rotation, if that shifts anything. I'm going to actually be in the bleachers on Sunday at Wrigley for the Guardians game, out visiting family this weekend. So spending some time with family there on the north side, and hoping for an interesting game, that's for sure.
Hey, you enjoy that for the most expensive fan experience in baseball.
Yeah, as much as I rag on it, in the words of the great Vin Diesel or Dominic Toretto, you got to do it for family.
Exactly. Well, enjoy your weekend trip out there. Take lots of pictures. Make the rest of us jealous in the group chats. Please do. All right, guys, you can find the audio recordings on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. You can see us live on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter. You can find merchandise at redbubble.com/people/DDAB-podcast. Follow us on the Facebook page at facebook.com/dollardogsandbeer and on Twitter at DDAB_podcast. All three of us are on Twitter as well. I'm at PyroLord314. Jason's at JRicker300. Joe is at JoltonJoe35. We are presented by Dark Arrow Podcast LLC and sponsored by the phenomenal Whiskey and Blade Barber Shop in Lidditz. Guys, may your dogs always cost $1. May your beer always be cold. Have a good night, and we will see you next week.